This special pre-AAA episode of Audiology Marketing Now is made possible by Hear PPC, the pay-per-click network that lets small, local hearing practices use big business search engine marketing strategies to generate new patients from the internet. Learn all about it at hearppc.com. Coming up on today's episode, Learning from the Mouse, what the Walt Disney Company can teach us about marketing a hearing practice. I'm Matt Perry, and this is the show that helps audiologists like you get more of what you really want, more happy patients and more profits. So this year, AAA decided to hold their convention in Anaheim. In just a little while, audiologists from all over will flock to the Anaheim Convention Center to learn what's new in the hearing industry. To learn all about the latest technologies, clinical research, practice management strategies, and maybe even a little bit about marketing a practice, thanks in part to a half-day learning lab with Jill Caseworm and yours truly. See the notes below for more info. But right across the street is another fabulous place to learn marketing strategies, Disneyland. Disney knows what they're doing, and we can learn a lot just by watching them. That's one of the cool things about marketing. There are very few secrets. It's all out there in the open. If you want to learn how the most successful companies in the world are marketing themselves, all you have to do is open your eyes and look at them a little differently, and you can see exactly what they're doing. Now, I have kind of a special relationship with Disney. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and my father was a school teacher and my mom was busy raising kids, so we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. But like most families out there, we all wanted to go to Disney World. So when I was around 13 years old, my parents started saying, when Matthew graduates high school, we'll all go to Disney World. By then, everyone will be old enough to appreciate it. At least that was the theory. So for years, I looked forward to graduating high school and going to Disney World for the first time. Well, the time came. I graduated and was accepted to my college of choice as planned, but early admission. So I went off to school and the rest of my family went to Disney World without me. Yeah, it was rough. So 10 years later, I finally made it to Disneyland, and I've been making up for lost time since then. I've been several times, and I even ended up joining a mastermind group of business owners led by a Disney expert. We meet 3 times a year to work on each other's businesses, and one of those times is behind the scenes at a Disney property, learning how they do business. And in this episode, I'm going to share just a few things I've learned about marketing from Disney. So here we go. 6 marketing lessons from the Walt Disney Parks, along with some ways we can apply these lessons to marketing our own hearing practices. Differentiate to avoid competing on price. Walt Disney came up with the idea for Disneyland while watching his daughters at a local amusement park. His daughters would ride the carousel while he and the other parents sat there watching them. He imagined creating a park that had more rides, was cleaner, and was designed so parents and children could have fun together. He knew the world didn't need another amusement park. It needed Disneyland, and it was different. Compared to the amusement parks of today, it's still different, but compared to what existed at the time, it was radical. When Disneyland opened, it was unlike anything on Earth. And because it was so different, they could charge a lot more than other amusement parks. They were in a market of their own. People weren't thinking to themselves, we can get the same thing down the street for half the price, because they couldn't. They could go to another amusement park for half the price, but it wasn't the same thing. Take a look at this. Frozen treats by Nestle. But do you see any drumsticks? Drumsticks are an extremely popular ice cream treat made by Nestle, and they're quite tasty. Is there any doubt that Disneyland could sell a ton of drumsticks if they offered them? Not at all. But could they sell them for $4.25 each when you can buy them for about 60 cents each from the grocery store, or even at the cafeteria at school? They probably could, but it would almost certainly elicit a "I can't believe I'm such a sucker" response at the register. Throughout the park, Disney avoids automatic price comparison to a certain extent by having their own version of snacks and treats. We know a drumstick is worth about 60 cents. But how much is a Mickey ice cream sandwich worth? Well, $4, everywhere you can get it. And as a hearing practice, you need to differentiate yourself within your market. You can't simply be another hearing practice using Me Too marketing If everyone in your market is using a 4-card open house mailing, maybe you should try a long-form sales letter. If their advertising always focuses on the product, yours can focus on the service. There are a lot of different ways to differentiate yourself. If you find yourself simply selling hearing aids like everyone else in your area, you've got a problem. Hearing aids are not a commodity. But if they're perceived as such, the price wars begin. And if someone really can get the exact same thing down the street for $200 less, plus a $50 gas card, why shouldn't they? Make sure the consumer realizes that what you're offering is not the same thing. Provide an experience, not a product. Walt Disney was in the entertainment business, and he wanted Disneyland to be an escape from the real world. For those of you who've been there before, I bet a lot of you would agree that it feels different when you walk through those gates. And that doesn't happen by accident. Once you go through the turnstile and under the railway, you end up on Main Street, USA, designed to resemble the center of town in 1910. Well, one of the first things you notice is the music. It's nostalgic and usually upbeat. But as the day goes on, it cleverly changes to nostalgic and relaxing. There are no newspapers or televisions linking you to the real world, and before cell phones became so common, it was probably a pretty effective way to separate you from the real world. Way down at the end of Main Street is Cinderella's castle, and it looks huge, but it's really not as big as it looks. It's 189 feet. If it was much bigger, they'd have to put a blinking red light on the top of it. So to make it look bigger, the stone blocks at the top are smaller than they are at the bottom. And they use a similar trick for the buildings on Main Street. The ones closest to the castle are shorter than those by the entrance. Why? Well, when you first get there, you're full of energy and the castle looks really far away and majestic. But when the fireworks are done and you're completely exhausted and you don't want to walk too far, the exit looks a lot closer than it really is. It's called forced perspective, and it's used all over Disneyland and Disney World to enhance the guest experience. Look at all the gardening around Disneyland, especially around Casey Jr.'s circus train. That's some pretty impressive gardening. But do you see any gardeners? Ever? Nope. They work at night with giant floodlights. Well, how about trash collectors? Well, people at Disneyland produce so much trash that they have to empty it during the day, but they're hard to spot. The goal is to empty the trash can and get rid of the trash as quickly as possible, so as not to be seen. All in an effort to enhance the guest experience. And they're pretty stealthy. What are we doing to enhance our guest experience? Do we treat them like guests? Do they feel welcome? My experience has been that some offices do this really well, and others fall very short. I'm thinking about a time I visited a physician and waited in the waiting room for what ended up being a really long time. And then when I was called back, I saw a nurse for about 30 seconds and then waited inside the treatment room for a really long time. I actually thought they had forgotten about me. I even popped out of the room to make sure they knew I was still there. Well, eventually the doc came in, quickly did his thing, and sent me back to the front desk to wait in line to be checked out. Now this whole time, not only did no one apologize for keeping me waiting for a ridiculously long amount of time, but no one even communicated with me about what was going on. Clearly the patient experience was not a high priority in this case. Now contrast that with an office with a receptionist that stands and greets you when you've entered. When the doc is running late, they let you know, apologize for the delay, and offer you a bottle of water. When they get you back there, they let you know that the doc is just finishing up next door and should be in just a few minutes. And when he comes in, he apologizes, again, for running late, cracks a joke, and seems generally interested in seeing you. It doesn't take special skills or extra money, it just takes a little bit of effort and desire to enhance the customer experience. We know that people choose to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And they get to know, like, and trust you not by your exceptional clinical skills, but by the experience they have with your office. Pay attention to the details. This past year, I had an opportunity to go behind the scenes and tour the backstage gardens at Disney World. Now, this isn't a garden designed for guests. It's more like an outdoor warehouse that's full of all the plants that get scattered across all the parks. Apparently, there are 2 ways to do topiary. You know, the plants that look like people and things? Well, the easy way is to create a wire frame and stuff it with moss and other plants and let it grow for a little while. Some of the topiary sculptures in Disney World are created this way, but a lot of the topiaries are created the hard way. The plants are gradually trimmed and sculpted over several years until they're perfect. No wireframes or moss, just a plant that looks like a princess. I saw a sculpture of Snow White that had been growing for years, and I was told it was going to be another 3 to 5 years before it would be ready to actually transport to one of the parks. It would have been so much easier to make Snow White with wire and moss, but that's not the Walt Disney way. Apparently, Walt Disney's attention to detail was both inspiring and frustrating to his employees. One of his early projects was asking his Imagineers to create a room full of singing mechanical birds. Nothing like that had ever been done before, and a lot of the Imagineers didn't think it would be done, or it could be done, the way that Walt Disney described it. But they figured it out, and when they presented the birds to Walt and showed them singing, he was impressed. But he was also disturbed. They swiveled, flapped, bounced, blinked their eyes, and their beaks moved, but they didn't breathe. He needed them to breathe. So the Imagineers went back to work to figure out how to make it look like they were breathing. And this attention to detail made a big difference. If you get a chance to check out the Enchanted Tiki Room, it's pretty impressive, and those birds are breathing. When he purchased the carousel for Disneyland, Walt had it rebuilt so all of the horses moved up and down, so no one got stuck on a horse that didn't move. Parents could bounce right along with their kids. That's actually pretty rare for a carousel. And check out the paint job on the horses. They're rotated in and out so they always look clean and new. And the same thing is true for all the various cars that transport people during the rides. Some are always out of commission, being refurbished and repainted. It's rare to see a coaster car in Disneyland with worn-off paint. I can't say the same about Six Flags. Walt was convinced that the details made a significant difference even if they weren't noticed by most people. The subtleties could be felt, even if they weren't seen. This attention to detail can help us in our practices as well. It goes right back to the patient experience. One of my earliest patients was talking to me recently about the first time she came to see me. When we first opened, she received a letter in the mail inviting her to a demonstration event. She didn't come to the event, but a few weeks later she called the office for a consultation. She told me the reason she called was because of the type of paper I printed the letter on. She said it had a certain feel to it. Now, to be honest, that was not my intention. I guess Home Depot or Office Depot didn't have enough of the cheap stuff that day. But it was a lesson to me about how the details can matter. Our patient intake forms are now printed on higher quality paper, and they're printed in color. And when we give them the intake forms with the clipboard to fill out, we also give them a fancy high quality wooden pen to fill them out with. Now, contrast this with the also popular black and white form that's been copied so many times it's fuzzy, accompanied with the Bic with the plastic spoon taped to it so it doesn't disappear. Or the pen with the awkward chain, or the pen with the giant fuzzy thing sticking out at the top of it. I get it, regular pens disappear. But most of the time they disappear because people either didn't notice they swiped it or because it was a cheap pen and they didn't think anyone would care. Well, our pens used to disappear all the time. And then we switched to nice wooden ones. We've been using the same 2 pens with our patient intake forms for 4 years now. Of course, that's just one little detail, but they add up. And I think that one makes a difference. And I have the feeling Walt Disney would agree. Create a company culture where everyone knows their role. Employees at Disney parks aren't called employees, they're called cast members, and they each have a role to play. When they're with the guests and where the guests are, they're on stage, and when they're away from the guests, they're backstage. And boy, do they take it seriously. As you interact with the cast members, they just seem happy, like unnaturally happy, but in a good way. But these aren't supernatural people, they're playing a role. Under the Magic Kingdom in Florida, there's a system of underground tunnels that cast members use to get from one section of the park to another. Legend has it Walt Disney was wandering around Disneyland one day and saw a cowboy cast member from Frontierland walking through Tomorrowland to get to his workstation. He felt like it spoiled the illusion a bit and wanted to make sure that didn't happen when they built the Magic Kingdom in Florida. So they built these underground tunnels. It's also where the break rooms are, where they punch in and punch out, and where they do typical employee things. In fact, the day that I visited backstage a few months ago, they had signs up all over the place directing people to the room where they were conducting cast member hearing screenings. While underground, these people were all normal. They walked by me and some of them didn't even smile. And that was okay. But above ground, they're on stage and being overly cheerful at all times, in part to play their role. One of the things my mastermind group likes to do when we visit is ask various people for directions to different places throughout the day. Now, cast members are trained not to point with one finger. In some cultures, that's apparently offensive. So they're supposed to always point with an open hand or at least 2 fingers. And we like to test them out. And you know what? They always pass. We have yet to catch someone pointing with 1 finger. They're well trained and happy to play the role. Disney has a very structured management system too, and the managers at all levels encourage their cast members to go the extra mile to enhance the guest experience. I heard a story about a time when management decided to start handing out recognition cards to employees when they were caught going the extra mile. The idea was that the signed cards could be turned back in and periodic drawings would take place for prizes. Obviously, the more recognition cards you collected, the higher your chances of winning were. So they started the program, but very few cards were coming in. So upper management went to lower management and said, "Hey, how come you guys aren't handing these cards out like we talked about?" Well, the lower management said they were handing them out, they just weren't coming back in. It turns out the employees were so proud of receiving the recognition that they weren't taking the cards home, that they were taking the cards home and keeping them. The tangible proof and recognition for a job well done was more valuable to them than a prize. So management had the recognition cards reprinted with a tear-off carbon copy so the employee could keep one part and turn in the other part for the prizes. Now think about your practice. Is there a company culture? Do your employees buy into your culture and play their role accordingly? I've been very lucky to have acquired excellent employees who are gifted in many ways. But our office has a certain way of doing things, and it's very important to me that everyone does certain things in certain ways. Now, I'm sure at some times they may think their way is better, and I bet at some times they're right. But it's important to us that the patient experience remains consistent between clinicians and exceptional. Are we perfect? No. Do we sometimes get lazy and cut corners? Yes. But we know our roles and we strive to play them the best we can. Test and track everything. Earlier this month, Disneyland announced that they were setting a minimum age requirement to enter the park without an adult, and the age is 14. When asked by the press how they came up with that specific number, their spokesperson rattled off a number of reasons, but one of them was extensive customer surveying. Disney measures everything. I can't tell you how many times I've entered or exited the park and was immediately greeted by a really friendly person in a vest holding a tablet. They ask questions like, "Is this your first time entering the park today? Did you experience Goofy's Flight School today? How would you rate Goofy's Flight School's wait time, appeal to children, appeal to adults, etc.?" It's always quick, and I don't know about you, but I always feel like I'm somehow making a difference by answering their questions. And then they survey you via email a few days after you get home too. Well, Disney knows which rides are most popular, at which times of the year, which times of the day, by which demographics, which stores sell more product, which products produce the most profits, which products sell the most when placed near the register, which products sell the most when placed near the entrance, and on and on. If Disney makes a change, there's a darn good chance it's because of overwhelming customer feedback or financial statistics. And if a change occurs at the suggestion of management as a test, it's not going to last long if the financial stats and customer feedback don't support it. Now, how about us? My observation is that most of us, myself included, are lazy when it comes to knowing our numbers, testing and tracking. I'm pretty good at tracking certain things. For example, I know which pay-per-click keywords drive the most traffic to my website and which pages on my website are the most popular. I can also tell you which yellow page ad designs have been the most effective and which ones were duds. But I can't tell you what our patients perceive as our strengths and weaknesses because I haven't asked them. It's been on my to-do list for 5 years, and I don't have a good excuse for why I haven't gotten around to doing it. In this day and age, with online survey apps, tracking numbers, practice databases, there's so much potential for tracking and testing. If you do a mailing, use a tracking number to measure its success. In fact, why not split the list in half and send a slightly different version of the mailing to half the people with a different tracking number? If one version of the mailing outperforms the other, you can use that version next time, perhaps split testing it with yet another version. Testing and tracking over time produces better results over time. It works for Disney, and it can work for us. And number 6, always innovate. Walt Disney was notorious for asking for the impossible. His Imagineers were asked to do the impossible on a regular basis, and he did not like it when someone told him something couldn't be done. Walt saw problems that needed solutions. One such problem was related to the trash cans. When the park first opened, it had a problem with the trash cans. Trash cans were used, the trash cans that were used were the type of receptacles used all over the place, all the time. Basically a large barrel that people dropped their garbage into. But as they filled up throughout the day, some of them would start smelling bad and attracting insects. So Walt put an Imagineer on the job of figuring out how to fix the problem. His solution? A new type of trash can lid. It was a lid with a swinging door that let people put their trash in, but that kept the stench out and kept the insects out. It's a type of trash can lid that's all over the place now, but for some reason no one thought of it until the late 1950s. Here's another innovation, soaring over California, or soaring at Disney World. It's one of my favorite rides, one that should have never been possible. You're strapped into a chair, hovering in front of a giant circular screen, and at times it actually feels like you're flying. Well, in the early stages of planning this ride, they hit a serious roadblock. They couldn't figure out how to get 87 people off the ground and facing the screen comfortably, safely, and in a reasonable amount of time. It almost halted the entire project, and many thought it was impossible. Well, one of the Imagineers ended up figuring it out at home using his kid's erector set. He built an elaborate cantilever system that did the trick, brought it into work the next day, and the problem was solved. Fast passes were another huge innovation, and one that made a big difference to Disney's bottom line. One of the biggest complaints Disney would hear is that their lines were too long. When people were standing in line, they would turn frustrated and unhappy, which was a problem. But they also weren't spending any money while they were standing in line, which was also a problem. So Disney came up with the Fast Pass. You check in, get assigned a time to come back, go shopping, buy food, etc., etc., and when you come back at the assigned time, you get to cut to the front of the line. It was a win for everyone, and still is. And now they're working on RFID integration, a personalized wristband with a chip in it that's scannable from a distance. Not only will this technology be used to facilitate the FastPass system, but rumor has it, it will be used to personalize your experience in the park. I can't even imagine the reaction my 4-year-old daughter would have at seeing Cinderella and then having her greet her by name. Well, hello, Anna. How are you doing this morning? That's pretty cool. Kind of creepy, but still pretty cool. One of the things I love about being an audiologist is the flexibility we have in how we shape our careers. You want to run your own business? Open a private practice. Want to see kids? Great. Don't want to see kids? That's fine too. Don't like business? Well, you can work for another audiologist or a hospital or an ENT. Don't want to see patients? Try animal research or interoperative monitoring. But I'm going to assume that most of you are like me, in business, and not doing much interoperative monitoring. In private practice, we have the freedom to innovate as much as our heart desires. And I personally love that. And it's one of the driving forces behind my decision to open my own practice. When I was a student, I worked in an office that used RealEar with every patient. So we would have NOAA open with the programming software, and then we would have Oracle's RealEar window in on-top mode over that. We would have to drag the RealEar window all over the screen throughout the appointment in order to make adjustments. So, being the geek that I was, I suggested to the owner that he let me install a second graphics card so we could have 2 monitors, one for the programming software and one for RealEar. He declined, stating that he was fine dragging things back and forth. But you better believe it, when I opened my practice, we had 2 monitors. Now we actually have 4 monitors on the main computer we use to program hearing aids. 3 40-inch ones that display things for the patient, and a small 22-inch one that's just for the clinician, for things like glancing at the schedule and looking at wholesale pricing. That's just one innovation we've come up with to improve our practice and enhance the patient experience. There are many more, and I'm sure you have many of your own. In fact, why don't you share one of them with us in the comments section below the video? I'll list off a couple others, and we'll see if we can't get a list of creative solutions to private practice problems going below the video at audiologymarketingnow.com. Walt Disney was known for always trying to improve things. He famously said, "Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." The same should be true for our practices. Why do we do what we do? Is there a better way? And if there is a better way, how can we make it happen? If you get a chance, if you're going to be in Anaheim, I encourage you to take some time and visit Disneyland. Look around and see what you can take home to your practice. If you're like me, you'll probably come home with at least one Disneyland-inspired way to improve your practice. Please stop me and say hi if you see me in Anaheim, and for those of you who won't be there, be sure to tune in next time to learn more modern marketing strategies designed to get you more of what you really want: more happy patients and more profits.